The analytical trends don't exactly favor Ohio State, and that might just be enough for Penn State to get a win on Saturday.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And to preview this matchup from the analytical standpoint, we have Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus, host of the Pro Football Focus College Football Show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, your predictions if you have one for Penn State versus Ohio State. Max, we're going to start with this because I think this matchup is very, very close. Now, I think Ohio State is still slightly better, and I think the analytics say that too.
Yeah, I would say Ohio State overall is probably a more talented team than Penn State, just by a little bit. But I do think this is a very, very close game due to some key injuries on Ohio State's side of the ball specifically. I know Penn State's got a big one as well. Drew Aller and denied Dennis Sutton is still questionable as well. But I think Ohio State's got some other injuries that you should be looking out for. And also, Ohio State's just not playing that well right now, right? They've had two straight games. I know one of them was to Oregon, who's currently the number one team in the country. The other one was to Nebraska, though. They barely squeaked by with that. So, yeah, while Ohio State, I will say, I agree with you, is the better team on paper, the way they're playing right now is a little worrisome.
That quarterback matchup, Drew Aller being one of those injured key players. He practiced the other day and looked okay for the most part, looked like there weren't any limitations, but we know that he's not going to be 100%. Nicholas Singleton isn't 100%. And then over on Ohio State side of things, the offensive line is pretty much the question mark there when I look at the Buckeyes. That quarterback battle, Will Howard versus Drew Aller, or do you even think that, could Bo Pribula even come in and handle a lot of the duties? Or how much of a difference of Penn State's chances, margin of victory would there be, or odds for or against Penn State if you have Drew Aller in there for a bulk of the game versus a Bo Pribula against Ohio State?
Yeah, listen, I love Bo Pribula, and he was so impressive in that win over Wisconsin. I know a lot of Penn State fans disagree with this. I think their chances hinge on whether or not Drew Aller can play, right? Okay. I don't know if Bo Pribula can go in there and beat Ohio State, right? He's able to do it against Wisconsin, and good on him, honestly, but I don't think you can win this game without your star quarterback in Drew Aller, your future NFL quarterback in Drew Aller. I just don't think they can do it. So I think I love Bo, but I think their chances really hinge on number 15 being able to go.
What is it about Bo Pribula? Aside from the fact that, yes, Drew Aller's more the pro-style quarterback, I think he can read a defense better. He's got the stronger arm, the more accurate arm. I really think that's kind of the difference in Bo Pribula's game, because where he makes up for it with his dual threat ability, we don't know if he can throw the ball deep. And this isn't a slight at Mike Yurcich or the just throw it deep joke from a season ago. I don't know how much we can trust Bo Pribula as a passer just because he completed some select passes against Wisconsin. I still have my reservations.
So do I, honestly. He made some big throws in that game. He completed 85% of his passes in that game, but he wasn't relied on to carry the offense. Andy Kolnicki did an amazing job, and he continues to do an amazing job just catering the offense to whatever they got out there, honestly. So they were able to rely on the run game, able to rely on Bo's legs, and able to rely on his passing game just to get through that game and get out with a win. Against Ohio State, you need more than that, right? You can't just do good enough against Ohio State. You got to be above and beyond. And I agree with you. The arm strength, the processing ability, all of that, that favors Drew Aller. And if you look back at the Oregon game, the only game that Ohio State has lost so far this year, Dylan Gabriel's making big throws down the field, right? So you're going to need to beat them deep if you want to beat Ohio State, in my opinion. They're not going to let you just move the ball 5 yards at a time down them. You're going to have to make some big explosive plays, and to make those plays, you're going to need a quarterback who has one of the strongest arms in college football to make those deep throws down the field at times when he needs to. So that's why I think really Drew Aller needs to be the quarterback of this game, and why Penn State I don't really think has a chance if Bo Pribula is the quarterback.
Do you like the idea of a two-quarterback system for this game? Because it worked at Kansas now against different caliber of opponents and two different quarterbacks. Daniels and Bean at the time. No, not Jaden Daniels on the Washington Commanders. Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean at Kansas. But Andy Kotelnicki was able to maximize that, and it worked well with almost a 50-50 quarterback split. Is this something that would help or hinder Penn State against Ohio State? I think it would be good because it's not really too much on tape. There's just some select plays and packages with Bo Pribula, but nothing where it's the full intensive 2-quarterback system. Do you think that's a bad idea for Penn State to run?
I'd be very, very cautious of the two. 50-50 split's a big split. I think that's something I wouldn't be doing. If Adler's ready to go, he's ready to go. And then I would run the offense the way you've been running it all year, where Adler plays most of it, and then maybe you put in Bo for select packages like they've been doing all year. Okay. I would not mess around and do a 2-quarterback system against Ohio State. That's not something I'm very interested in. The 50-50 split, especially, I don't think there's no really reason to start Drew Aller then if you do that 50-50 split. I don't really know if the niggas should do that. So I still think Bo should play. I'm not saying Bo should be sitting on the bench the entire game. I think he should play the select packages that Andy has him playing every game already. But yeah, I think Drew Aller, if he's ready to go, he's absolutely your starting quarterback and should not be splitting time with another guy.
Let's look at some of those key matchups because I've highlighted the fact that I don't trust Penn State's secondary against Ohio State's wide receivers. Jeremiah Smith, honestly, would probably be taken in the top 10 of this year's NFL draft as a true freshman. Then there's Emeka Egbuka, who probably would have been drafted day 2 in last year's NFL draft for the 2024 cycle. I don't know that Penn State, outside of A.J. Harris, has the talent to cover those guys in man-to-man or take away a side of the field. And then there's Carnell Tate, who's progressively getting better, right? Just had over 100 yards against Nebraska. Those 3 wide receivers, aside from A.J. Harris, and that would be a 50-50 battle. Okay, so A.J. Harris would win some reps, and then Jeremiah Smith or Egbuka would probably win the other half of the reps. So you're getting basically a neutralization between that matchup. But then it's Jalen Kimber against who? Then it's Zion Tracy. It's Elliott Washington, who did not have a good game against Wisconsin. Like, he got picked on a lot. I look at those cornerbacks, those defensive backs against any of those 3 wide receivers, and then maybe even if a Brandon Inniss cycles in too, I don't like that matchup for Penn State.
Yeah, I don't either. And to be fair to Penn State, I don't like any secondary against Ohio State. They got an incredible group of wide receivers, right? Jeremiah Smith, like you said, is the highest rated receiver to ever come out of high school, and he's proving why already in his true freshman season. I've heard comparisons to A.J. Green. I've heard comparisons to Julio Jones. Like, we're talking about a special wide receiver who's just 19 years old doing this. And then Emeka Egbuka is probably going to be a first-round pick in this year's draft as well. Yeah. So you got him. You mentioned Carnell Tate, who just is coming off his best career game. Very, very talented kid as well. He was a near 5-star recruit coming up high school. So you got 3 guys that are going to be future NFL receivers without a doubt. Against a Penn State secondary that, while it's been good this year, I'm not denying that. I think they have like top 20 coverage grade in the country. They do have issues at times too, right? Like you said. So I like A.J. Harris a lot, but even him against whoever is still a 50-50 battle, like you said. And then the other 2 spots are could be a weakness for Penn State. So it's not just a Penn State thing. It's not like we're trying to trash on Penn State by saying it's about Ohio State and these receivers being absolutely freaking ridiculous. So I think that, like I said, any secondary in the country, if you don't get a pressure on the quarterback and you give Will Howard time back there, any secondary in the country is going to struggle against Ohio State's receivers because that's how good they are.
Is that the biggest mismatch in this game when it comes to positional groups, or is there another one that you're looking at like this is going to decide the game, or this is going to have the biggest impact one way or another? Maybe both sides of it. I think the trenches, Ohio State's offensive line versus Penn State's defensive line, with or without Deni Dennis Sutton. I think Abdul Carter can wreak a lot of havoc. But then on the flip side of that, Ohio State still has JT Tuimoloau, and Drew Shelton has not been perfect. He's certainly been far from it. He's been okay, a little bit above average. And then Nolan Rucci might get a lot of run in this game if Anthony Donko can't play against Jack Sawyer on the other side. 2 guys that could be first-round picks.
Absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned Jack Sawyer, you mentioned Tyreek Williams in the interior as well. I mean, they got dudes in that defensive line. So I actually think both defensive lines have an advantage in this game because Penn State's pass protection this year has been kind of below average overall. They've had some issues in pass protection. They've been a little bit better in run blocking, but pass pro, they've been okay. I'm just looking at the other side, too. I think Ohio State's secondary is one of the best in America that they have so far this year. They have superstars in that secondary like Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs and Denzel Burke and Noah Benison and a lot of great players. And Andy Kotelnicki did an amazing job of drawing up receivers to get open. But I think just pure talent level, I think Ohio State's secondary is more talented than Penn State's receivers that they got right now. But it's on Andy. Honestly, it really comes down to whether or not Andy can kind of be in his bag like he's been all year and just draw up amazing plays. And I'm feeling he can in this one. But yeah, that Ohio State secondary is one of the best in America, and Penn State's receivers are going to have to work really hard to get open. But Tyler Warren against those safeties, that's going to be a heck of a matchup because Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom, that might be the best safety duo in the country. But you got maybe the best tight end in the country and Tyler Warren going against him. So that's a matchup that I cannot wait to watch on Saturday.
We'll talk specifically about Penn State's game plan and Ohio State's game plan, how they can maximize their abilities against one another in the matchup. With all of that generally being said, Max, where the Pro Football Focus spread is Ohio State minus 2.5. So Penn State's actually closer to that margin than Vegas or the general sports betting odds are giving them. Do you have a prediction so far for this game? Where do you kind of see this game projecting?
Yeah, listen, as a lifelong Penn State fan, I hate to sound like a homer here. I actually am picking the Nittany Lions to win in a close one. I have it 24-23. Now, it really hinges, like I said, on Drew Aller and whether or not he's 100%. He's not going to be 100%, but as long as he's out there and close to 100%, then I'm picking them. But I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit. I think that Penn State pass rush could be the difference in this game because they have an advantage over a really, really beat-up Ohio State offensive line that has really struggled lately. And Will Howard is one of the lowest graded quarterbacks in the country when he's under pressure. So that is a big, big time matchup for Penn State just to get after Will Howard. And also the Ohio State run game has been like non-existent in the last 2 games. I never thought I would say about this backfield with Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. Judkins has done nothing over the last 2 games, which has been shocking. So if you stop that run game, you force them to throw the ball, and then you get after Will Howard, that Ohio State offense could have a lot of difficulty moving the ball on Penn State.
We'll pick back up with that defensive line matchup for Penn State and how they can exploit Ohio State's offensive line, how Penn State can maximize its game plan against the Buckeyes to win on Saturday. That's coming up after the break. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. And you know what else gave me a bit of Penn State fan fuel this past week? It was the Jalen Reed pick six interception for a touchdown to swing momentum back in favor of the Nittany Lions against Wisconsin, but also Bo Prabula coming off of the bench ice cold, getting settled in and keeping the offense on course to beat that Badgers team on the road. That's a tough Big Ten conference game. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you're rooting for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate, ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help you stay fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. Today's episode is also brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Hey, football fans, fall is back, and that means one thing: college football is in full swing. And to make sure you're ready, we've partnered with Home Field, the exclusive apparel sponsor of our show, to bring you their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. Now, Home Field is the go-to for premium collegiate apparel. This is a Home Field t-shirt. It's crafted with comfort in mind, featuring vintage designs that will make you the envy of any tailgate. And with over 180 schools to choose from, including Penn State, there is something truly for every fan. But the real MVP is the Home Field Platinum Football Box. I ordered one for myself. This is your all-access pass to exclusive gear for the 2024 season, with 3 never-before-seen items from your school, plus VIPs get even more. You'll get a special hat and a 2024 Platinum Pass for early access and discounts all season long. So don't wait. All you got to do is head over to homefieldapparel.com and you can gear up today. And we have a special promo code for you to use to get a special discount. It's 15% off when you use promo code WEARE24. That's WEARE24 at checkout for 15% off your order. That's homefieldapparel.com. Let's make this season unforgettable. So, Max, I'm glad that you ended up picking Penn State because I've said 27-24 Ohio State just because of some of these matchups. But, maybe you can persuade me and change my mind about this. I just still think overall, when you spend allegedly $20 million on a roster with NIL, that it's Penn State. Funny enough, Max, Penn State has closed the gap on on Ohio State. Like, I think the margin is closer. Penn State's never been this close to Ohio State. X's and O's, coaching, actual player talent. But then again, Ohio State also raised the bar because JTT should be in the NFL. Jack Sawyer projects well. I don't know if he was draft eligible. I think he was, but again, these guys are NFL talent across the board. You mentioned that entire secondary, and then they go get guys like Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs in the transfer portal. Like that's just unheard of. This is the new modern age of college football. So it's not that Penn State took a step backwards. They took a step forward, but somehow Ohio State even took a step forward as well.
Yeah, that's what you got to look at. And that's why I picked Ohio State to win the national title before the season, right? Is that you look at that roster, it's crazy, right? Like you said, $20 million plus in NIL that they spent in the transfer portal and in recruiting, right? You got the number one player in the country in Jeremiah Smith to come to your program as well.
Absolutely.
That doesn't happen free, right? You got to pony up some money to make that happen. So Will Howard even coming into the program, that of course cost them some money as well. There's a lot of Ohio State's just a very, very talented roster, but I'm picking Penn State only because you just look at the trends for Ohio State over the last two games at least. It's concerning. Now, they lost by one to maybe the best team in the country, so you can't really take too many negatives away from that. But then that Nebraska game was eye-opening, man. I was like, this is a team that you should be putting away pretty easily, and they were struggling against Nebraska, and they almost lost that game as well. So maybe they're looking ahead. Maybe they're looking ahead at Penn State, and they kind of just overlooked that game. And maybe they will come into this game and just be lights out and playing up to their talent level. And if that happens, if they play up to their talent level, they will beat Penn State, I think. But if they don't, if this is a trend that continues, then I think Penn State has an avenue to win this game.
And one of the avenue to that victory is the defensive line matchup, as I mentioned to tease going into this segment. Abdul Carter needs to have, so Tyler Warren on the offensive side, which you already mentioned, I think Abdul Carter needs to have a hero type of game defensively, especially if Dani Dennis Sutton is not available or is even 50%. If he's playing half of the snaps, if he's not playing a full game and he's going 50 to 75% speed, I mean, that's a big difference. And I like Amin Vanover. I like Smith Vilbert. Those guys have been in the program for a long time, and James Franklin has applauded them since the preseason. Like, it's not just, we're hyping them up going into the game because they're going to get more playing time. He said this all along that, hey, these guys can play. They're just behind two future NFL starters in Abdul Carter and Dani Dennis Sutton here. So does Dani Dennis Sutton's availability kind of make or break that defensive line matchup for Penn State?
I don't think it would make or break, but it'd certainly be a huge, huge advantage if Penn State had him going in this game. He's a terrific edge rusher. He's a really good player, and I think that could be a matchup to watch if he's out there, because that is definitely a guy that you want out there. But I think you're right. I think Abdul Carter is the key in this one, because he's a guy he's a speed rusher, and Ohio State might be playing their left guard and left tackle. And while Donovan Jackson is a terrific player, I'm not taking that away from him.
He's a guard.
He's a power player, right? He's a guard. So speed is not something that guards are used to, right? So that could be a big, big time disadvantage for him going up against a speedy guy like Abdul Carter. If Abdul Carter was a power rusher, like say a Jared Hurst or someone like that, then even though Jared Hurst is a terrific player, I'm not saying that, this is an example, but
matchup. It's all dependent on matchup.
Right, like Jack Sawyer, for example. Jack Sawyer is a power rusher. If it was Jack Sawyer going against Donovan Jackson, then I would say, okay, maybe Donovan Jackson can hold his own. But the fact that it's a speed rusher going up against him, an elite speed rusher at that, that's where I'm like thinking, okay, he could get around on Donovan Jackson probably pretty easily. So that is a big matchup. And I think on the interior as well, because he moved Donovan Jackson.
Zane Durant, yeah.
Right, exactly. You move out to left tackle, you got a new guy in Luke Montgomery at left guard for Ohio State, who's barely played at all in his career. Now you're going against an elite defensive tackle in Zane Durant as well. That opens up some matchups for him as well. So it's a lot of just disadvantages for the Buckeyes offensive line right now because of how beat up they are. If they had Josh Simmons out there, I would pick Ohio State to win this game straight up. But the fact that they don't have him, and the fact that their backup left tackle, who's really struggling even
Mikulski.
Mikulski got hurt as well. That's why I'm picking Penn State to win this game. I think the pass rush has a big advantage. And like I said, Will Howard, when he's under pressure, let me get the number right here. When he is under pressure, he has a 28.4 passing grade. That is the 6th worst in the country. So if that holds, that continues, and you get him under pressure, there's a lot of opportunities for Penn State to make some plays in that defense.
How does Penn State's secondary adapt? Because if Will Howard even gets that extra split second of time, and Chip Kelly is going from a head coach to another, so he's one of the best coordinators in all of college football. Same as Andy Kotelnicki. Like I really like this coaching battle. This is for any college football savants. You are going to love this chess match between Chip Kelly and Tom Allen, and then Jim Knowles versus Andy Kotelnicki. In the secondary, we mentioned Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka. I don't need to go back through it. So if you're Penn State secondary, you're going to run more zone, right? And you're going to run zone type of blitzes. What can Tom Allen honestly do to make Will Howard's day more difficult and just try to neutralize those wide receivers as best as he can?
I think what he can do, first of all, I think they're gonna blitz. I'm not saying they're not gonna blitz, but what I would do initially is I would say, hey, let's see what our 4-man rush looks like first. If our 4-man rush is winning handedly and consistently, then all of a sudden you can drop 7 guys back there, right? And you can say, okay, beat us with throw into the teeth of the defense. I like Will Howard a lot. He's been a really good player for them, but he's not a C.J. Stroud type of quarterback that's just gonna pick you apart, right? So I think that is the thing that if I'm Tom Allen, I'm rushing 4 initially, seeing how well they get pressure. Obviously, you're still going to blitz at points during the game, but I don't know if I would be setting a blitz all that much initially, just because I want to see how dominant my defensive line that I think could be dominant is. If they are dominating and you're getting pressure on them, even with a 4-man rush, then all of a sudden you could drop 7 guys into coverage, and even the greatest receivers in the world would have difficulties getting open on 7 guys right in coverage. So that I think is how I would approach it initially. If you're not getting a great pressure on Will Howard with a 4-man rush, then you can start to dial it up a little bit more and blitz more. But I would initially start off with a 4-man rush and see if you could drop 7 in coverage consistently.
I think you've answered this already, but I want to get a definitive answer. Do you think that the more of the responsibility is going to come, like who has to win the day? Is it on Penn State's defense or Penn State's offense? I think it's the defense just because of some of those mismatches. But again, you don't bring in you don't get a head start on the coordinator search and not bring in Andy Kotelnicki because this is the game for Penn State. Because if not now, then when? Because you don't play them again until 2026. That's in Columbus, and so they're not going to be back in Beaver Stadium until 2028. Yeah. So is Andy Kotelnicki the differentiating factor, or is it Tom Allen's got to limit this electric Ohio? So when they are clicking, Ohio State's offense is electric. Who bears more of the responsibility for saving the day for Penn State?
I think it's the defense. I agree with you. I really do, because I think you look at the advantages for Penn State in this game, and I think all of them come defensively. So if you don't take advantage of that, if your advantages defensively don't happen and Ohio State's just moving the ball on you, I don't think Penn State can win this game if it's a shootout. I don't think they can. I think if that's a avenue, I don't think they have the horses to keep up with Ohio State if the defense is just not doing anything. The game that Penn State wins is in the low 20s, right?
Defensive struggle.
Yeah, exactly. You want a defensive struggle in this game, which I think is very possible. That's why I had it 24-23. I think it could be that. Even my co-host Dolan had both teams scoring below 20 points. He had it 19-16 Ohio State winning that game. So I think the defense has the advantages in this game more so than the offense does. So if the defense is not taking advantage of what they've got, then I really struggle to see Drew Aller and that offense putting up 35+ points on Ohio State's elite defense. I know Oregon's done it already, but Oregon's got an elite offense. I think Penn State's offense is really, really good. I'm not gonna say it's an elite offense. So I think the defense needs to be the differentiating factor in this game, because I think that's the way for Penn State to win it if it's a very low scoring game.
So the blueprint's there for Penn State, but what about Ohio State? We've already talked about that the offensive line has tons of question marks, but they still have those wide receivers. They have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. These are some of the best players that Penn State's going to face. How can Ohio State maximize them? We'll tell you about it after the break. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's a convenient, simple setup. and you just have to visit FanDuel.com to join today. Let's check in on those lines again for Penn State versus Ohio State. Penn State is still a 3.5-point underdog to the Buckeyes. 12 o'clock kick this Saturday, but the money line has moved actually in favor of Penn State. It is plus 138 on the money line for the Nittany Lions. If you're betting the Buckeyes, minus 166. The total continues to move down. 45.5 now. It started at 47.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now over at FanDuel.com. Again, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. It starts up front, and that's why college football coaches say it. I feel if football coaches across the board will say that. The games are won and lost in the trenches. We've already hashed out Ohio State's offensive line, but I feel like Chip Kelly can scheme away from, quick screens, roll the pocket, and Will Howard has some, dual threat ability. I think of the fact that, okay, you have to count for 3 of those wide receivers. They don't really go to the tight end G. Scott as much, and that's fine. Maybe he gets a few catches here and there, but it's not like a Cade Stover, if you will, in this matchup. And then I think of, okay, you have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, even though they haven't been at their best at any moment in time. These guys can explode for that hero type of game that I mentioned for Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. But offensively, like Penn State's never been in this situation. USC is as close as it gets because they have Woody Marks. They have Zachariah Branch. They have a quarterback, Miller Moss, that is better than Will Howard, in my opinion. But they don't make mistakes. They're veterans of the game. They're not going to be fooled by anything. Like Tom Allen can maybe get Will Howard to stumble a couple of times, but not egregious mistakes because he's played so much college football. I don't think Penn State's had to account for that, where they can go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different players, and then, your quarterback can tuck it and run if you have everything covered.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that what Ohio State should be doing in this game is, one, they should be watching the USC tape back, especially the first half of that game when USC was running wild on Penn State. And Chip Kelly, I know Chip Kelly's his own run schemes that have been amazing, but I would watch that tape back and see exactly what Lincoln Riley was doing just to bother Penn State. And obviously, Penn State figured it out in the second half and overtime.
Right.
First half, it was a nightmare for Penn State's run defense. It was like 13 yards per carry USC was averaging in that first half. So I would watch that. And, yeah, I think the run game is critical in this one because if you run the ball really well, then the pass rush for Penn State won't be as great because they have to think about the run. So if you if you run the ball really well and you go play action, Penn State's pass rush all of a sudden has to account for the running back, so they won't be going full steam ahead at Will Howard. Then if you do that and Will Howard has time back there, like we said before, you get those receivers get open on that secondary. So I think the run game is critical in this game. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, they cannot be held to below 30 rushing yards like they were against Nebraska each, right? I think that's a mark that they need to be hitting like close to 100 yards, I think, in this game or something like that. Because if you can take advantage in the run game and set up play action and then give Will Howard time because of that, then I think that they have the advantage offensively and they can make some plays on Penn State with those receivers downfield. So the run game with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, they need to wake up, honestly. It is a big game for them now. It's been 2 straight games. They've been non-existent pretty much. They need to wake up in this one because if they don't, and Penn State's able to pin its ears back in pass rushing situations, then that's an advantage I think Penn State will take advantage of. So I think the run game for Ohio State is very, very critical in this game.
Now, for what it's worth, Nebraska, according to Pro Football Focus, has the 85th ranked run defense. But when it comes to yards per carry, Nebraska is top 10. So kind of give with that what you will. Nebraska's kind of hit or miss when it comes to defending the run. I don't know that Ohio State put its best game plan together for the Cornhuskers, given that you just lost an emotional 1-point deficit game to Oregon on the road like that. You had the bye week to recover, but still, they're thinking about that one. Nebraska doesn't mean as much, and then you have Penn State on the other side of it. But I get the concern because, okay, this is the tangible result. We have to go off of what we see in the film, not just, how were they emotionally feeling going into that game. Another position battle that we haven't really highlighted, Max, you've talked about, hey, they got Caleb Downs, they're getting Ransom back at that safety spot, who's been described as maybe the defensive MVP for Ohio State. You get Caleb Downs out of the transfer portal. Are Penn State's wide receivers going to be able to do anything against that secondary? Denzel Burke is not having the season that I thought he would. Again, another player that's projected at or near the first round, and Burke's honestly taken a step back in another year of college football.
Yeah, I still think Penn State's receivers are at a disadvantage in that matchup. If you're just going one-on-one with them, I think that's a disadvantage for them because the safeties, like you mentioned, it's probably the best safety duo in the country. They got some really, really good corners, like I said, in Denzel Burke and Davis Benison. They're really good players. So, I think you look at them. I think that they have the advantage over Penn State's receivers. But Tyler Warren's an elite tight end. They're probably going to force feed the ball like they've done all year. Again, I think setting up the run, too, is critical. I think Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are going to be really important parts of this game plan for Andy Kulnicki, and they need to perform to create easier throwing windows for Drew Aller into the teeth of that really, really good secondary. So, it's an advantage that Ohio State's got for sure, that secondary. But if you can run the ball well against them, and it's hard to run the ball on Ohio State because they have the fifth best run D grade in the country. But if you can find some avenues to make them creep up a little bit in the box, then Drew Aller can take advantage and throw over them. But they definitely need to set up the run because I just don't know if Drew Aller straight dropbacks can beat the secondary one-on-one.
And that's really the difference here. Like I said, for me personally, I know there's some matchups there, but I feel like Chip Kelly can scheme around those things. Jim Knowles is getting all of his defensive assets back at full strength. I would say the biggest question marks for Ohio State defensively are probably the linebackers. I think that the linebacker play, when you compare it to everything else, when you have Caleb Downs, when you have Ransom when he's healthy, the other defensive backs, maybe that's where you can get some matchups. So Nicholas Singleton is able to get some catches out of the backfield. Maybe you get Tyler Warren matched up on a linebacker there. I don't think Ohio State has an answer for that regard. So Jim Knowles is going to have to do his best job to make sure Ransom or Downs or man-to-man, or maybe they do some bracketing. But I feel like if you're Knowles as a defensive coordinator, you're confident that Caleb Downs, as a future top 10 pick in the NFL, top 15 maybe, can cover Tyler Warren. We'll see. I think that's one of the best matchups all day individually.
Yeah, so do I. Like I said, it's and you and him and Ransom, who should be back for this game. Brian has already said that he expects Lathan Ransom to be good to go for this one. So those are two guys that have the task of covering Tyler Warren. Not an easy task at all, but if there's any safety duo in the country that can do it, it's probably Ohio State. So that's a matchup I can't wait to watch.
This is a field position battle, I think, across the board. Whoever's and Penn State special teams have not been good. They're not reliable. I think Riley Thompson has taken a slight step back. I mean, he's not punting as frequently, so we're not seeing him, have it. It's the opportunities and getting, which is good, right? But I think about kick return hasn't been great. Nicholas Singleton's not 100%. It's really been quite some time since Penn State's really had an electric returner. Saquon Barkley back there at the kick returning spot. And then punt return's been such a question mark because Caden Saunders isn't out there. Basically, Penn State just kind of their status quo with kickoff. But does field position, special teams really, does that have a big factor to finish up the show? Can that play a big factor in this game between Penn State and Ohio State because of how close this will be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have a close game, field goals are always going to be critical. Extra points even could be critical if you mess up those. And then, like I said, the punting battle, if it is a low-scoring game, the punting battle could be huge in this one. So, that is definitely that you can't ever forget with the third phase of football, right? So that is definitely an area that I think Penn State should also be looking to win in this game.
He is Max Chadwick over at Pro Football Focus, host of PFF's College Football Show. All of his links and work will be down in the description. I highly encourage everyone to go check them out. Max, thanks so much for the time, as always, to preview this Penn State-Ohio State game, and can't wait to see you at the game up in the press box.
Absolutely, Zach. Thanks for having me on, man.